Uni doesn't stop once you leave the campus. Uni continues throughout your whole week. So that's definitely a really big commitment, especially whilst being a full-time student. On top of that, I also work part-time. So trying to juggle uni and part-time work is obviously super fun. And even just making time after all of that to see friends, to go to the gym, to make time for family, they're all commitments that you don't realize are important to you until you have to make a schedule where you're committing to all of those things. I think in terms of managing my time, what I find to be most effective is kind of making to-do lists. So figuring out the tasks that I need to do for that day. It kind of gives me some direction, but I also am a bit crazy and I like to make very specific by the hour blocks of what I need to be doing. And I know a lot of people don't like to be restricted like that, and that's perfectly fine. But that works for me because it kind of keeps me accountable. So Google Calendar is my best friend, making different calendars for different things. Like, for example, things like when I get paid or when I have work. So what my work schedule's like, as well as what uni readings that I need to do, when my classes are, what time I like to go to the gym, things like that. So it's all in different calendars, so I can kind of click in and out of it so my calendar doesn't look way too busy. But also, I have everything on there. Google Calendar is something I'd highly recommend. It's super friendly. You can have it on your phone as well as your laptop. So I like to be able to, look through it whenever I need to, whether that be on the train or even if I'm in class and I need to put something down, like readings that I need to do or something that the lecturer mentioned that I should add into my notes. I also like a reminders app. It's really great. Even the thing on Apple, that's just personally what I use, or even Google Keep if you're not an Apple user. I'd highly recommend that just because you can write down what you need to do, make a to-do list, check it off if you've finished it. I find that sometimes in a week, I might have up to 60 pages of readings for all my readings combined. And I know it sounds like a lot, but trust me, you get through it pretty quickly or you understand it pretty well if you find time in your schedule to really sit down and do it. So what I mean is blocking off maybe an hour or two to just sit down and do the readings. I think my biggest piece of advice with time management, especially with someone who's like me and likes blocking off time to the hour, to the minute, to the second, if they could, is that sometimes things don't go according to plan in regards to time management. I found that before I'd come into uni, some days I'd say, okay, after this lecture, after having lunch, I definitely want to get an hour of studying done. But then I see a friend after lunch and we just get to chatting and get to catching up, and that studying just goes away. And that's perfectly fine. Just make sure you're doing it at a moderate rate. So if you have an exam coming up or an assignment coming up, you probably need that hour of study. But if you're on campus and it's just, week 3 or week 4, it's just a random week during the term, then it's perfectly fine to spend that hour catching up with friends if you need to.
So my first time management strategy in university was simply writing out all of my goals and trying to complete them maybe in the first 2 days of university. And that way I have a complete break of university for the rest of the week. And that wasn't really the best strategy because as my work piled up, I found myself not being able to complete those goals by the first 2 days of the week and having the rest of the week to do whatever I'd like. And having that guilt of not being able to complete my goals really shunted my workflow for the rest of the week. So learning from that experience in first year, my goal is to now still set up a list, but I break it up into goals over the week. And not only that, I also separate into goals where, what are the goals where the best version of myself can achieve, and what's the set of goals that the worst version of myself can achieve. So it's a combination of the workload from multiple courses, as well as other commitments from extracurricular activities and your interpersonal relationships, really pushes you to make sure your time management is on point and make sure you can really excel at each of these activities and make sure you're having the best time. So a specific tool I use to oversee my time management is definitely keeping a small journal. So I definitely write in a journal every morning, oh, these are the goals I want to set out for myself. what am I going to do, how am I going to achieve them, and what's the minimum version I want to achieve, so make sure I'm still on track even though I don't achieve as much. So journaling, keeping a daily journal, writing your thoughts down is definitely helpful. So as an engineering student, you have a lot of different assignments and a lot of different content to study. So being able to break it down into multiple categories really pushes you to make sure you have a good time management. So in the daily life of an engineering student, there's a distinction between learning content, applying that content, and doing projects. So being able to effectively allocate your time for each of those phases of the learning process and the development process is definitely important for an engineering student. So for example, if you're planning to make a project, like a physical product project, using 3D printing, for example, you gotta spend time coming up with the design of the product, actually making it, and then doing the finishing touches, and I don't know, making a document or a report about it. So understanding that you have those four processes, you're gonna make sure you have enough time to allocate and really make sure each step is fully maximized.
So, time management in university is definitely different to high school. So, in terms of your classes aren't structured on a fixed timetable, in high school, you might start at 9 a.m., finish 3 p.m. for 5 days a week. At university, it's completely different. The timetable is really flexible in terms of what you want to do and what's flexible for you. So if you live far away from a campus, you might want to start maybe a little later in the day. If you live closer to campus, you might want to start a little early in the day. So in my first year, I did a lot of the physical notes in terms of blocking out my time. But then I found that it wasn't as flexible for me, so I moved to digital and using an online calendar app in terms of planning out my day, and that was way easier for me because I could easily delete events without having to erase it or like white it out. I could delete events. I could like send my information to other people, like, hey, here are the times I'm free. Can you get back to me when you're free and things like that? So it's much more easier to organize time that way. But again, completely up to you. If physical works and you like to write things down, that's fine. Digital was just easier for me, I found.
I realized that time management was really, really important at university when my assignment was due in 2 days and I hadn't particularly started yet. It was very much all on me. It was my fault that that had happened. But I think it can come as a really big shock to a lot of people that when you're in an environment that is so independent, that requires you to go and do all of the work and you to go and manage your time, it can come as a really rude shock to a lot of people. Time management at university is a lot harder than it is in high school. I think a lot of it really comes down to the fact that university is so self-driven and requires you to go and essentially look after yourself. You're never going to go and get the teachers telling you to go and submit your assignment soon or to go and remind you of how late it's going to be due. Because at university, a lot of the times you're only really seeing your cohort or your lecturers, like maybe even just once or twice a week. In high school, using calendars and using student diaries, all of that never personally worked for me. It never made sense to actually go and use it. But in university, when you've got 6 different assignments to keep track of, 3 different social events that you want to go to, right? It's so much more useful in this sort of context where because you're managing all of the things that you want to go and keep track of, rather than just the English assignment that your teachers are telling you to go and submit, it becomes so much more useful and easy to go and keep track of the things that actually matter to you. A lot of people kind of drag the kind of same system of how they learn in high school to university, and a lot of the times that never quite works for them. The thing that I would go and tell my first year self about time management is to, of course, just be willing to experiment. I was the person who had to go through the kind of journey of self-discovery, of trying to go and make myself understand that the strategies that I had in year 12 that carried me through the HSC weren't going to work for university. Not when, I've got so many other responsibilities of becoming an adult that, the kind of constant grind of being able to go and study, 12 hours a day, that wasn't really available to me anymore. So it's being able to go and experiment, to go and find out what kind of strategies work for me best now that I'm in a completely different context.